And good evening, all of my isolated friends. This is another episode of the Quarantine Kitchen. Tonight's meal, stuffed peppers. Because I had peppers from a Costco shop that were, not necessarily going soft, but they need to be used up. And ground beef, of course, is the cheaper option for protein these days because there's no chicken anywhere. Or there seems to be a shortage of chicken. So some spices, some garlic, there's onion, there's mushrooms, half a can of, or a cup of diced tomatoes. And this all is put together pretty quickly. So right here I have 5 hollowed out peppers. Try and scrape as much of the ribs as you can get to so that way you've got all your filling. I've got a pound of ground beef, lean, because you don't want shrinkage. I have a tablespoon, sorry, I wrote all my ingredients. This is my recipe, by the way. So I have 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce and a tablespoon of soy sauce. I have, now I have diced garlic because I cheated. Normally I would do fresh, but I'm out. So I took 2 teaspoons of minced garlic, but you can do 2 or 3 cloves, whichever. Now in my spice mix, I've got half a teaspoon of coriander, but you can also use fresh cilantro if you can get your hands on it. I prefer cilantro. I just don't have any, and I wasn't going out to get more. And then I've got a 1/4 teaspoon of chipotle pepper, which I really like because I like to do a bit of a Mexican style stuffed pepper because there's lots and lots of flavor. And then I do about a teaspoon of kosher salt. I've also got a small onion, minced. I've got about a cup of, now I use portobello mushrooms just because I like the flavor of them. They're a little bit more dense. And then I've just got a cup of rice. And now you can use any kind of rice that you want. Brown rice will probably give it a little bit of nuttier flavor. I just use regular basmati just because it'll soak up the rest of the liquid that we're going to cook down. So, and then I've just got a simple, cup or a cup and a half of diced tomatoes. I'll probably only use just a cup depending on how much my beef shrinks down. And then I'll meet you over at the stove. Okay, so I've got my nice big skillet out. Now, because I'm cooking onions first, I'm just going to give a nice little dollop of olive oil. And then we're going to turn your heat to, medium or whatever. And once that heats up, you're going to cook your onions first because you're going to want them nice and not necessarily caramelized, but pretty translucent. So I would cook them right down into a nice golden color. Now, once that's happened, then what I want you to do is I want you to put your garlic in also with your onion. That'll really kind of marry everything together. Don't be afraid to use your hands, like I always do. And then we're just gonna wait for all that to cook down and we'll come back. Okay, so now this is all nice and golden. We're gonna add our mushrooms. And we're gonna cook all of that down. So even if you have to add, well, you should have enough oil to cook this all down in with the onions. If you have to add a little bit so things don't get burnt up, drizzle just a little bit because there's enough fat and grease into the ground beef for later. So you're going to want to cook all these mushrooms all the way down so that they're really reduced in size. You want as much, see I'm going to add a little bit, just a drizzle. Just so that way everything has a chance to cook and evenly, not burn. You want to keep your pan as nice as possible. Chopping that all up as they cook down. So we'll come back once they're all cooked down and we'll go over the next step. So now that I've got my mushrooms kind of cooked down, we're going to scrape all of the bits into just a small dish and set it aside. Okay, so now while our skillet is nice and hot, we're gonna cook our ground beef. So you're gonna wanna make sure that this is in nice, not big chunks of ground beef, or it won't all sort of come together properly. So you're really gonna wanna chop up your ground beef until it's like, well, sort of like taco sort of bits. So once we cook all this down and brown it all down like taco meat, and we'll come back. Okay, so this is where our beef is nice and chopped up. It's kind of like taco seasoning. We're just letting it all finish cooking here. Okay, and then you're gonna add all your onion and your mushrooms. And you're gonna stir all that in together. Okay. Then what you're gonna do is that spice mix that we mixed together, you're going to pour, sort of sprinkle all over. And we're gonna mix that all together. Now that should be nice and fragrant at this point. You'll be able to smell the cumin. You'll be able to smell the chipotle. The garlic's starting to set in, so it's all nice and heated up. Okay. Okay. Now I grabbed my Worcestershire and soy sauce because these can be really bland once you add the rice. So you want to make sure that you've got a really nice fragrant spice mix going. Now you can alter the chipotle if you like spice. Larissa can't have the spice because it makes her throat close up. So I make things less spicy but lots of flavor. So now we're going to add our rice. We're just going to kind of evenly distribute that. You don't even have to have all your rice, but it really does kind of help things sort of come together. And it also, you know, gives you a bit of starch instead of potatoes, and you're not really having a lot, really. It's kind of protein heavy as opposed to, well, protein and vegetable. So we're going to mix all that in, and then we're just going to pour our liquid in, and the rice is going to soak all that up. Now here's the nice part. So I have my tomatoes. Now I would use a slotted spoon, just because you don't want a lot, you don't want them really watery. You don't want, because you want to just be able to pack this into your pepper shells. Just set that aside. So you're gonna take, squeeze out some, and you're just gonna evenly distribute some tomatoes around here. So I had leftover tomatoes from another recipe that I cooked previous. So I try not to waste a whole bunch of stuff. So I try and plan my meals for the week. Now, that's probably a good cup without all the juice. So I'm gonna let that sit in there. I have to add more tomatoes depending on how nicely this cooks down. So see, your filling is coming along really nicely. Now also, the nice part about it is, don't worry if you've got lots of filling left over, because it's also, like, you can add more rice to this, more spices later on, and this is definitely a good leftover meal. So you could definitely put this over extra rice, or just have it, you can put this, add rice, you've got leftovers, and it really makes a nice sort of lunch meal if you really want to. Nice comfort food. So that's pretty good, actually. I wouldn't want anything else. Maybe just a bit of tomato. And of course, you should always taste your concoction, just because you should always find out how flavorful it is, if it's lacking in something. If it's too salty, add You know, if it's too salty, you could even sprinkle just a small bit of sugar just to take down the acidity of your tomatoes. But it's tasting pretty darn good right now. So we're going to turn off the oven, and then we're going to bring our concoction over. So I've got my cooked concoction here, and then what I do is I like Tex-Mex cheese because it just adds a little bit more flavor. You can use, you know, mozzarella or cheddar or whatever cheese that you wish. So I just take a nice big spoon and you start filling in. Now I pack mine in there because, I mean, let's be honest, it's not a whole bowl of this stuff. So I try and pack it in there as much as I can. So you're really just gonna make sure that that's all in there. So if you can pack it in as much as you can, so that way, you know, your family's getting, maybe not that much, your family's getting, you know, at least a serving. That's probably like, you know, like a cup. And then what I would do is I would just sprinkle a bit of this nice Tex-Mex cheese out of it. Just a little. I know I say, who doesn't like cheese, but sometimes less is more. So I would just put just a little bit of the Tex-Mex cheese, it just kind of covers it so that way the rice doesn't dry out. And then, so do that with your remaining shells. And then, okay, so these are nice and fresh out of the oven. They're hot. So your peppers are nice and soft. I'm just gonna cut into one and let you see all the really nice filling that you've got here. So this is all the liquid and the juices all soaked up. It's a great filling. It's really nice. It's gluten-free because you're using rice. You could use tofu if you really wanted to, if you were doing meatless. Again, you could even chop like black beans into it instead of tomatoes if you didn't want tomatoes. I would now put a little bit of beef broth in there if you're, you know, not gonna use tomatoes or whatever. But any filling that you can do with the ground beef and a little bit of rice and whatnot. Now, I decided that we're not doing spinach salads. We're just gonna have some steamed broccoli. So lots of vegetables. Pretty inexpensive meal, really. I mean, you know, peppers are, I think 3 for $2.97, even at Walmart. If you're, you know, a family of 3, or you just pick up an extra pepper or whatever, I buy the 6-pack or the 6-pack at Costco. And yeah, so as Ray Ray would say, sláinte.